Welcome to our second installment on the era of good feelings. As we previously looked from 1815 to 1824 during the presidency of James Monroe, we get this nickname due to the fact that we had won the War of 1812. We had this feeling of political unity and harmony, which was kind of exhibited by the just a single political party in our nation, and this overall optimistic feeling in the United States. Part of the era of good feeling was when the Republicans took on some of the Federalist ideas. One of those was the ideas of internal improvements, as explained by the American system, put forth by one Henry Clay. Now, the American system had kind of different things involved with it. One was the Tariff of 1816, which was meant to try to stimulate industry while creating a home market for farmers, therefore making the United States more self-sufficient. What this did was raise import duties on average by about 25%. It also looked to create the second bank of the United States with a 20-year charter, which would be a mixed public-private venture. Again, one of the ideas that Thomas Jefferson, one of the founders of this political party, kind of had disagreed with, as many of the new things that they were taking up weren't basic tenets of the Republican Party to begin. And the third one is internal improvements, looking to build things like the national road at federal expense, which would eventually cause problems because the question was, who do you help and how much do you help them? And speaking of the national road, also known as the Cumberland Road, it eventually connects Baltimore, Maryland, all the way out to St. Louis, Missouri. And it's actually the first great federal transportation project. It actually turned out to be working like a toll road. And you can imagine these Conestoga wagons traveling from St. Louis out east. And really what it does is kind of help connect the old Northwest Territory and all the settlers living out there and the farmers, and helps them be able to kind of get goods back and forth. And eventually the American system would have other benefits, whether it be building locks and dams and building of canals, but making transportation easier and cheaper, but it would connect cities and markets and really kind of create this internal movement of people and goods. However, it didn't always help everybody equally. The West got roads and canals and federal aid. The East got backing of protective tariffs from and goods from the West, and the South maybe didn't benefit as much. And also, a lot of times, Southerners were upset with the high tariffs because it increased the cost of things that they were buying and might hurt their sale of cotton in other countries. And so, with all this government spending and new transportation, we really get what's known as the market revolution, which really kind of evolves from a revolution in transportation. Back in 1790, one of the early transportation revolutions we see is the creation of the first turnpike, which is kind of the first toll road where you have to pay to use it. It was known as the Lancaster Turnpike because it was in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. In fact, by 1832, nearly 2,400 miles of roads connected most major cities. A lot of times they were privately owned, but the problem was that they cost too much to make worthy. To kind of fix them up, repair them. You rarely got made money out of it. And therefore, people eventually turned to the water, especially with upriver transportation and the building of canals. And again, speaking of upriver transportation, you hopefully recognize this picture and this person by now, as it is the Claremont and Robert Fulton who helped with the first successful steamboat with the upriver transportation. And as we turn to water for transportation, we kind of see that water will be the kind of the big reason for the U.S. rapid economic development, as it is so much cheaper to transport over water than land. And that's why we see the construction of these canals, including probably the most important one, the Erie Canal, built from 1817 to 1825. Now it ended up connecting Albany to Buffalo both in New York, and was about a stretch of 364 miles. And where it averaged 40 feet wide, it was only 4 feet deep. But what it did was reduce shipping rates to 1/12 of what it used to be to ship it over land. And therefore, with this new canal, it also makes New York City the commercial capital of the United States. So really, our market revolution was more of a revolution of distribution than production. We were just able to transport things cheaper. But like turnpikes, canals a lot of times prove to be unprofitable as well, even though we see the canal boom in the 1820s here. And in fact, not only do you see the Erie Canal, but you also see some of the other canals that sprung off of it. As well, by the 1840s, other canal systems throughout the rest of the United States. But with the advent of the steamboat and canals, it still proved to be rivers to be the most important national transportation method, especially, as I mentioned, once the steamboat helps with upriver costs. And with these advances, we have improved transportation, which increases farm income. It helps stimulate commercial growth, and it improves our agricultural output. Really able to connect markets and get the goods to the market much easier and cheaper. And therefore, as it becomes cheaper and easier to move goods and people, not surprisingly, more people are moving west. But in 1810, roughly 1/7 of the U.S. population lived west of the Appalachian Mountains, and a short 30 years later, in 1840, nearly 1 out of 3 people lived west of the Appalachians. And as one would expect, as people moved west, they tended to recreate their life that they were accustomed to from out east. Northerners would move and be farmers, Southerners would kind of move their plantations. But people might move west for different reasons. It could be the fact that there was overpopulation out on the East Coast. And with that, it caused land prices to go up. And as farmers and plantations were, harvesting crops year after year, a lot of times the fertility of the soil decreased over time. And so people might move west looking for more fertile land. And then there's other groups that were moving west not by their choice. The Native Americans a lot of times would be relocated further west, maybe west of the Mississippi River. And this is something we'll take a look at in a future chapter as well. So this is kind of some of the internal improvements and migrations during the era of good feeling. And we'll take a final look at this era in our last episode.